Aging ruins your sleep. But the good news is there is something that you can do about it. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the specific things that you should do to get a great night's sleep as we all get older. Hey everyone, Dr. Michael Breus, the sleep doctor here. A few weeks ago, I released a video on how aging negatively impacts your sleep, and a lot of you asked the question about what can you actually do about it. So I thought I would discuss the three of my main sources of sleep problems that I see in people who age and what you could do about it on this video here from my house. Now, the reason your sleep gets worse as you age is usually the result of several different factors, but they seem to fall into three main categories. One is your habits, the next is your biology, and then the third are some possible medical issues that can be available. And don't forget, it could be habits before bed, during the day, during the night. You never quite know. Let's start by talking about something that happens with most people as they age, which is technically called phase advancement, but what I call grandma and grandpa want to eat dinner at 4:30. That's because their melatonin production has advanced, meaning it's happening earlier in the time frame that it usually happens. So their tummies are rumbling because they think it's actually later than it is. This happens very, very frequently. In fact, in most people, it seems to happen. And it's supposed to happen. The signs and symptoms of this phase advancement usually tend to be things like people are getting up a little bit earlier. They can perform tasks a little bit better in the morning. They start to get really sleepy later in the afternoon, or may even fall asleep on the couch type of thing. Remember, this is due to a change in melatonin as we age. There is a physical slowdown of melatonin production for many people once they hit age 55 and above. So that in that particular situation, it may make sense to take a melatonin supplement to help boost your production. Now, I want to be clear about this. Not everybody out there needs a melatonin supplement. You would want to talk with your doctor, see if you have some of these symptoms. And if you do, then you would want to start at a very low dose of melatonin, like a 0.5 milligram, and take it about 90 minutes before you wanted to go to bed and see if that could be helpful for you. Because the reason that you're wanting to eat earlier and go to bed earlier is because your melatonin is actually turning on too early. So by taking this pill a little bit later at night, you can teach your system to do it a little bit later. What this also represents for folks out there who've taken my chrono quiz is what we call chrono longevity. For example, if you were a bear, you might turn into a lion, for example. Or if you're a person who isn't an early bird or a night owl, you might turn into an early bird. Those are the type of things that we see happening. So remember, as you age, your circadian rhythms will shift later. But to understand your circadian rhythm, it will help you to know when you're at your most productive during the day and when to go to bed to get the best quality sleep. Over at sleepdoctor.com, we have the quiz that can help you determine your chronotype. So it's a wonderful tool that I've designed to give you practical tips for getting your best sleep and being your best throughout your day. Now, let's talk about some of those habits that we all have a tendency to have as we get older that unfortunately we really haven't dropped. I got to hit the big one hard. It's caffeine, right? So one of the things that a lot of people don't really think about, especially if you've been a caffeine drinker for a significant period of time, is simply it doesn't have as big an effect on you anymore, so you keep loading it on. But just because you don't feel the effect does not mean that it is not affecting your biology. There have been a lot of studies to report that we are more sensitive to caffeine internally as we age. And another study indicated that adults over 65 take 33% longer to metabolize caffeine. So you really should be slowing down or stopping much earlier in the daytime. And a lot of people, from a habitual standpoint, they like to order coffee with their meal, right? And so if you're having dinner at 5 o'clock or 4:30 and you have a cup of coffee, it's not only taking you 33% longer to get that out of your system, but it's certainly going to affect your sleep. Okay, Dr. Breus, you've convinced me. What do I do about it? So there's a technique called caffeine fading. Now, I'll be honest with you. I used to be, at one point in time, a fairly, not heavy coffee drinker, but I would say I might have 3, maybe 4 in a day type of thing. And so what I decided to do was a technique called caffeine fading. So you take your last cup of caffeine for the day and you make it half caffeinated and half decaf. You do that for 1 week. Then you have that last cup and it's completely decaf for 1 week. And you start moving yourself. So each week, you basically remove a half a cup of caffeinated coffee and add a half a cup of decaffeinated coffee. You still get your coffee, you still have the ritual, you still have all the taste, you still have all the smells, but what you don't have is a problem with caffeine later on. Another big activity that a lot of us do as we get older is we have a little bit more time on our hands, or maybe we're not as stressed. So guess what? We take what I call unscheduled naps. So it's not because we want to, it's just because maybe we're bored or hanging out, but we will experience a natural small temperature increase between 1 and 3 p.m. in the afternoon. When that happens, it's a signal to our brain to release a little itty bitty teeny tiny bit of melatonin. So this is the reason why everybody between 1 and 3 have a tendency to get sleepy. But if you're inactive, let's say that you're a senior and you've already had your walk for the day and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're sitting on the couch watching TV, you have a very high chance of taking a nap. What happens if you take a nap? Well, remember, there's 2 systems in the brain for sleep. One is called sleep drive, the other is called sleep rhythm. If you nap, you will actually have an effect on both sleep drive and potentially sleep rhythm. So if at all possible, what you really want to do is avoid the nap. Now, between 1 and 3, your body is going to naturally get sleepy, but if you can just go outside and get some direct sunlight, that actually turns off the melatonin faucet in your brain and really makes for a much better afternoon. I'm going to digress for a second and tell you a story about a patient of mine, 63-year-old male, and he would religiously take a nap after lunch. But here's what was interesting is his nap would sometimes last for an hour, 2 hours, something like that. So one of the things that we always wonder about when people are napping a lot during the day is, are they getting good sleep quality at night? So one of the things that I had him do was do a home sleep test, and guess what? He had a mild form of sleep apnea that none of us had really thought about or detected because he didn't have a lot of symptoms other than the napping. And once we were able to figure that out, we fixed his apnea at night. No longer a need for nap during the daytime, much more active and be able to do what he wants to do. By the way, I am a big fan of naps, but you've got to do them correctly. So go over to my YouTube channel. It is filled with great advice on things like getting the best naps, setting up the best bedtime routine, even how to get the right supplements for your sleep. I publish anywhere from 1 to 2 videos a week, so be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can get notified whenever a new video arrives. Next, we're going to go from habits to biology. What, biologically speaking, could be affecting your ability to sleep as we get older? Well, one of the big things is there's a natural increase in EEG, which is brainwave arousals as we age. I mentioned it in one of my last videos, the one I was talking about earlier, but remember, sleep becomes what we call fragmented as we age. So we basically go from wake to stage 1 to stage 2 to wake up, stage 1 to stage 2 to wake up, and we start to miss out on some of that deep, restorative, refreshing sleep. That slow wave sleep really has a tendency to decrease. Also, what we see is our proportion of stage 1 increases. Got to be honest with you, stage 1 doesn't do a whole lot. Stage 3 and 4, or slow wave sleep, that's the physically restorative sleep that we're looking for. So one of the things that we always want to do is be aware that just naturally, our brain is not going to have nearly as much oomph or power as it would have when we were younger. So there's some things that we can do about it. Also, I wanted to let you know that the American Academy of Sleep Medicine has found that these aging changes are so proficient, we actually change the way we score sleep studies based on your age. So if you're 55 plus like me, guess what? We're going to actually score your study a little bit differently because the biological changes are so prevalent. All right, now what do you do about it? Well, the big thing to do, you can't change your biology, right, is to limit the environmental impacts that could make your awakenings worse. Such as, well, number one, you don't need any light in the room. So if you can, keep the lights as low as possible. Still have a night light if you need to get up to use the restroom. I don't want you to fall in the complete darkness. If you can, keep your room nice and chilly, but don't make it so cold that you need to put on your winter coat to go to bed. If you can, block out as much noise as possible. That seems to work well for most elderly patients. I'll be honest with you, as I'm getting older, my hearing is not so great, so the noise doesn't seem to bother me nearly as much. Another biggie that a lot of people really don't think about is consider replacing your mattress. I was surprised when I did this. I actually discovered that a lot of older people have been sleeping on their mattress for a very long time. And here's the thing, as we get older, our physical bodies change much more rapidly. So if you, let's say you waited, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years before you got a mattress in your 20s, that was probably okay. But in our 50s, got to be honest with you, you can't wait that long. I don't know about you guys, but I wake up with, I think, a new pain or ache every month or so. And so trying to kind of mitigate that and understand it is going to be important. If you have not replaced your mattress in, I'd say, probably 6 to 7 years, it's probably a really good idea to look at that, because that could have a major impact on your ability to stay asleep. Remember, your biology is keeping you in a lighter stage of sleep. If you've got a crappy mattress, it's just going to keep waking you up and waking you up. What I tell people all the time is you want to look for something that has a lot of cushion and a lot of pressure relief. Personally, I also like for my seniors to have really good edge support, because personally, I sit on the edge of my bed when I wake up in the morning to kind of catch my breath and kind of get oriented. I know a lot of people my age do, and we don't want people to slip off the end of the bed. So do yourself that favor. You want something with edge support. You want something with really good comfort, as well as some extra support in the center. Another thing that disrupts sleep as we age is the prevalence of, yeah, you guessed it, medical conditions. Honestly, some of the most interesting and most prevalent common medical issues in the aging population are things like high blood pressure, nearly 60%, diabetes, 27%, depression, 16%, dementia, 12%, obesity now at 42%. All of these medical issues do have potential effects on your sleep. Obesity, as an example, could be leading to snoring and sleep apnea, which will bring you into a lighter stage of sleep. So when you think about medical issues, and I've listed quite a few, the goal here is to get the medical issue treated first, because in many cases that's primary and the sleep disorder could be secondary and potentially go away. Even if you don't have one of the medical disorders that I just discussed, what if, of course, you could have an undiagnosed sleep disorder? I mean, that's certainly a possibility. As we get older, we certainly see a lot of this occurring. Specifically, we see a lot of obstructive sleep apnea, which is caused by that narrowing of our airway in our throat, which usually leads to disrupted breathing throughout the night. Snoring is one symptom of sleep apnea, but don't forget, sleep apnea can lead to gasping and choking in the middle of the night. Again, fragmenting your sleep, making you wake up to breathe. The current best treatment so far is something called a CPAP machine. These are considered to be the gold standards, primarily because they seem to work about 99% of the time, but they're not so much fun to wear sometimes. Many people get used to it, but then sometimes people will need an oral appliance, which is like a mouth guard, which replaces CPAP. There are quite a few different things out there, so I don't want people to get discouraged and say, oh, got to go get a sleep study. I know they're going to stick a CPAP on me. I certainly don't want that. Don't worry so much. Let's figure out what's going on to make you have these sleep disruptions, and then we can figure out what might save them. Others, sleep disorders that I have a tendency to see in many of my senior population, which is the one I'm entering into quickly, is restless leg syndrome and something called periodic limb movements of sleep. So restless leg syndrome is this weird, as soon as you lie down, you get this creepy, crawly feeling on your legs, and the only thing that makes it go away is if you get up and you walk around. If you get up and you walk around and it doesn't go away, that's probably peripheral neuropathy and something you should talk with your neurologist about. But if it does get up and go away, it's probably restless leg syndrome. Now, here's what's interesting about restless leg syndrome is oftentimes that's a pre-bed thing. So when you're lying down and still awake, it occurs. But it can cause significant insomnia and cause significant sleep disruptions. It sort of has a cousin or maybe a sibling called periodic limb movements of sleep. Now, periodic limb movements is where your legs twitch like this all night long, or your arms twitch or something like that. You'd think it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but in fact, it actually moves you from a deeper stage of sleep to a lighter stage of sleep. Once again, as we get older, we're already in lighter stages of sleep, so we really don't need to get any lighter. So if your bed partner has noticed this kicking of the covers all night long or something along those lines, it's probably a sign that you may have periodic limb movements or restless leg syndrome. Unfortunately, there's no specific cure for restless legs and periodic limb movements, but assessing some of the underlying factors can actually help mitigate some of the problems. We would look at your current medications, we would check your iron levels, and make sure that you're getting enough exercise and movement throughout the day, which as we get older can sometimes be difficult. Older people have a tendency to take a lot of medications for other medical situations, and those medications could include things like antidepressants, antihistamines, antipsychotics. All of these can make sleep worse. And a lot of times the doctors are so focused on one area, like depression, that they're not necessarily looking at sleep. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not here to make a distinction between depression and sleep. But what I can say is there are some antidepressants that are very stimulating. I had one patient where we asked their doctor if we could remove the medication, which was called Wellbutrin, from a nighttime dosage to a morning dose. And as soon as we did that, magically they were able to fall back to sleep. So it's not so much getting off the medications, but understanding the medications that you're on to be able to see if they're making your sleep quality any worse. And if they are, maybe you change the dosage timing, maybe you change the dose, maybe you change the med. I want to be super clear though, you don't do this. You do this with the permission of your doctor and under your doctor's care. It's really important for people to understand that, because people should not just be changing the dosage or the timing of their medication without letting their prescribing physician know. Now, I want to talk about insomnia because it's something I hear very often from my patients. I was recently reading a study that indicated that 50% of older adults report some symptoms of insomnia, like trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, daytime sleepiness, other factors like irritability, memory issues. Things like magnesium and melatonin supplements have been found to be somewhat helpful, but I want to be clear here. If you feel like you've got insomnia, it probably makes a lot of sense to come see a sleep specialist like myself or a gerontologist, somebody who works with people in that age range, because it definitely seems to help those folks out at night. Magnesium, a lot of people ask me questions about. There's one study to show that magnesium seems to help elderly people with a magnesium deficiency who have insomnia. So if you think you fall into that category, it might make sense. Also, melatonin can be helpful, but again, the dosage here and the timing is very, very important. Also, many people don't know this, but melatonin affects medication. Let me repeat that. Melatonin affects medication. It affects antidepressants, hypertensives. It affects even antipsychotics. So one of the things to remember is if you're going to start melatonin, tell your doctors, because they need to know and understand, because it could have a pretty big effect on them. As we've seen, there are very real biological factors that are going to change as we age, but there are also some pretty complicated medical issues that all of us elderly complicate our sleep, right? So one thing you might not be thinking about is your medication list. A lot of people don't even know that many of the migraine medications have caffeine. Even some of the medications for central nervous system, like benzodiazepines, anti-seizure meds, also cardiac medications like beta blockers, and even pulmonary medications like theophylline. All of these can be so stimulating that they can have a big effect on your sleep. So if you start a medication or your doctor starts you on a medication and all of a sudden you notice that your sleep is disrupted, tell them. Like, call them up and say, hey, my sleep is really messed up. Is there anything that we can do? 9 times out of 10, they've heard this before and they've got an idea or something that will make intuitive sense for you to be able to hopefully mitigate that situation. My elderly patients have also I found that they take a lot of supplements, over-the-counter sleep aids, and things like that. But I'm going to be very clear about something, okay? There are a lot of elderly out there that have historically said, you know what, Dr. Breus, I take one of those PM medications, Tylenol PM, Advil PM, whatever. The PM is actually Benadryl. That's all it is. It's called diphenhydramine, and it is what's called an anticholinergic medication. There is now data to suggest, and this has been around for a while, that daily use of these PMs can absolutely lead to dementia. So this is not something to be playing with. If you are consistently using an OTC sleep aid, I would say you probably want to talk to your doctor and find out, number one, could you be a candidate for maybe cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been shown to be more effective than sleep aids? Or could you maybe need an actual prescription because your situation is temporary or time constrained? There are a lot of different ways that you can go about doing this. So I don't want you to think, hey, it's either supplements or I'm on the heavy drugs, but you really want to talk to your prescribing physician, because a lot of these OTCs can be more dangerous than you think. While OTC sleep aids work only in the short term, you can actually have more long-term success by taking vitamins and sometimes supplements. One that I recommend to a lot of my aging patients is vitamin D as in dog. Now, there's a lot to consider before taking any supplement, so I want you to check out the video on vitamin D right here that we've got next, because I take my vitamin D every single day. Taking it can not only improve your sleep as you age, but there are some great benefits for your daytime as well. This is Dr. Michael Breus, the Sleep Doctor, and I'm excited to have given you, hopefully, some great solutions for sleep as you age.